Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the absolutely wild and honestly pretty suspicious life of Darius the Great. We usually think of ancient kings just as conquerors, but today we're looking at a true ancient administrative mastermind, a guy who was completely obsessed with order, structure, and what he liked to call the truth. Before we jump in, if you love deep dives into history like this and want to uncover the secrets of ancient empires, make sure to subscribe to Untold Persia. You definitely won't want to miss what we have coming up. Okay, let's dive right into this. Just listen to this boast, taken straight off his tomb. He wasn't exactly known for his modesty, was he? Darius didn't just rule a kingdom, he ruled the absolute largest empire the world had ever seen up to that point. We're talking a massive, unprecedented scale, stretching all the way from the Indus Valley right to the Aegean Sea. Media, Egypt, Babylon, the whole shebang. And he truly believed he was chosen by the supreme deity, Ahura Mazda, to rule this giant slice of the earth. So here's our roadmap for today. First, the clever usurper. Second, written in stone. Third, architect of an empire. Fourth, the royal infrastructure. And finally, chasing ghosts and Greeks. All right, part one, the clever usurper. This is a truly thrilling rise to power. See, Darius didn't just inherit the throne, he essentially snatched it in a chaotic, ancient political thriller right after the death of King Cambyses in 522 BC. And the story here gets incredibly bizarre. According to Darius and the historian Herodotus, a Magian priest named Gaumata secretly hijacked the empire by impersonating the true heir, a guy named Bardia. This imposter actually won the people over by canceling taxes and military service for 3 years. But a nobleman named Otanes got suspicious. He had his daughter, who was in the royal harem, literally check the king's head while he was sleeping. Well, she discovers the king has no ears, which was a massive dead giveaway because this specific priest had previously had his ears cut off as a punishment. The imposter was totally exposed. So Otanes gathers a squad of 7 nobles, which includes Darius. They storm the palace, take out the imposter priest, and parade his head through the streets. But that leaves us with a huge question. Who among these 7 assassins actually gets to rule the vast Achaemenid Empire? Now, what's really interesting about all this is how they decided and how Darius allegedly cheated. They all agreed to ride their horses out at dawn, and the first horse to neigh at the sunrise would make its rider the king. Darius, being a pretty clever opportunist, went straight to his groom, Oberez. Oberez rigged it using the scent of a mare. Some sources say he rubbed the scent on his hands and let Darius's stallion sniff it right as the sun came up. Sure enough, the horse neighed first, the other guys bowed down, and Darius became the king of kings. But, as you can imagine, winning a rigged horse contest doesn't exactly guarantee the loyalty of millions of people. Which brings us to section 2, written in stone, carving out the truth. Darius had to cement this highly questionable legitimacy and fast. So he had this massive rock relief carved straight into the side of a mountain, the famous Behestone inscription. He used this monumental carving to basically rewrite history, claiming he was the 9th king in a continuous royal line stretching back to a legendary ancestor named Achaemenes. A lot of historians today suspect this was just brilliant propaganda. By branding the imposter as the lie, Darius perfectly positioned himself as the ultimate bringer of the truth. And to make sure everyone could read this so-called truth, he literally had a brand new writing system finalized. 42 is the number of symbols in the simplified Old Persian cuneiform that Darius specifically commissioned just to write this exact inscription. It was carved in 3 languages, Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian. This basically acted as the Rosetta Stone for deciphering cuneiform centuries later. Of course, the empire didn't just accept his shiny new propaganda peacefully. 9 different kings rebelled against him. The absolute toughest was in Babylon, where a guy named Nidintu-Bel claimed the throne. Babylon's defenses were way too strong for a direct siege, so one of Darius's generals, a man named Zobarus, took things to the extreme. He cuts off his own nose and ears, whips himself, and goes to the Babylonians claiming Darius had tortured him. The Babylonians completely bought the deserter story, gave him command of their troops, and Zobarus promptly turned around and opened the city gates for the Persian army. Once the rebellions were brutally crushed, Darius could finally shift his focus. Let's move to section 3, architect of an empire. Enter the ancient CEO. He morphed from a clever usurper into a total administrative mastermind. So the crucial point is the stark contrast in how these kings were perceived. Herodotus tells us that while Cyrus was seen as the merciful father and Cambyses the harsh master, they both still relied on voluntary gifts from their subjects. But Darius? People called him the huckster or the merchant. Why? Because he cared about profit, structure, and predictability. He scrapped the voluntary gifts and instituted a strict, fixed annual tribute. To actually manage this, he organized the entire empire into over 20 provinces called satrapies. Each one was run by a governor, a satrap, whose main job was to ensure that fixed annual tribute in gold or silver was collected and paid. This system created a massive, reliable revenue stream that funded his gigantic imperial machine. But how do you stop governors from skimming off the top across millions of square miles? You build an insanely advanced audit system. Documents we found, known as the Persepolis tablets, reveal a hyper-paranoid control network. Literally every single entry and exit of goods was tracked. They recorded exactly who ordered it, who delivered it, and who received it. Officials had to use physical cylinder seals instead of signatures to authenticate everything, and central inspectors ran constant monthly and annual audits. He minimized error and abuse on a scale that is frankly stunning for 500 BC. And with all that wealth pouring in, Darius started building. Which takes us to Section 4, the royal infrastructure, connecting the empire. Darius was absolutely obsessed with connectivity, and this brilliantly illustrates that obsession. The Royal Road. It was an ancient highway system featuring outposts called caravanseries, where travelers could eat and swap out horses. His network of fast royal couriers was legendary. Herodotus wrote that they were stopped by neither snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor darkness, a phrase that literally inspired the modern United States Postal Service motto. He even issued early forms of passports that gave official travelers daily food rations, a real game changer. He standardized everything he touched. He introduced a universal currency, the golden daric and silver siglos. He very smartly maintained Cyrus's policy of religious freedom, which kept the peace among all these diverse conquered peoples. And the architecture. He built on an epic scale, founding the magnificent capital of Persepolis and constructing the Grand Apadana Palace complex at Susa. He was pulling in cedar from Lebanon, gold from Sardis, and master craftsmen from across the known world. But Darius couldn't just sit back in his beautiful palaces. He had an empire to expand.
Finally, Section 5, Chasing Ghosts and Greeks, the final campaigns.
This leads us to the final and definitely most frustrating chapter of his life. Let's move to the timeline and see how this builds across the map. He successfully expanded eastward into the Indus Valley around 518 BC without much trouble. But pushing west into Europe, that got incredibly difficult. His campaign against the Scythians in 513 BC tested his absolute last nerve, and the Ionian Revolt eventually dragged him into a fateful conflict with the Greeks, culminating at Marathon. The Scythian campaign was basically a ghost war. The Scythians were nomads living out on the vast Eurasian steppe. When Darius marches his massive army across a bridge of boats into their territory, the Scythian king, Idonthursus, just outright refuses to fight. They used a brutal, scorched earth strategy, just running away, filling in the wells, and burning the pastures behind them. When Darius finally demands they stand and fight, the Scythian king basically replies, "We don't have cities to defend. The only thing we'll fight for are the graves of our ancestors. Good luck finding them." Darius just chased shadows until he was exhausted and forced to retreat. Well, that frustration completely boiled over a few years later. The Greek city-states in Ionia rebelled against Persian rule, and Athens actually sent ships to help them, burning the provincial capital of Sardis to the ground. Darius was livid. He allegedly shot an arrow into the sky, swore vengeance, and ordered a servant to repeat the phrase, "Master, remember the Athenians," to him 3 times every single night at dinner. That obsession directly led to the first Persian invasion of Greece, which was shockingly defeated by the Athenians at the Battle of Marathon in 490 BC. Darius started raising a brand new army to go back, but his health failed and he died before he could get his revenge. Which leaves us here. Was Darius a heroic savior who rescued Persia from an imposter and built an unparalleled marvel of administration? Or was he just a brilliant, ruthless usurper whose genius propaganda simply outlived the actual truth? Whatever the reality, he undeniably took a loose collection of conquered lands and forged them into the most sophisticated, structured empire the ancient world had ever seen. So, what do you think? Let us know in the comments, and as always, keep questioning the history you've been told.